There we are.
There we are, RJ.
Welcome to the regular meeting of the Novi Board of Education. It's Thursday, April 13th, and we are currently at the Educational Services Building. We have most of our board members present. Mr. O'Connor will be joining us partway through the meeting. At this point, if we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have a need this evening for executive session, Dr. Matthews?
I would say that we do not have a need.
All right, so we will not have an executive session this evening. We now have our student board member report. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you. And we have our secretary of the 7th grade at Novi Middle School here this evening. And I would invite her to introduce herself and present her report for the board.
My name is Evelyn Cho, and I am the secretary of Novi Middle School Student Council. To begin, the Novi Middle School Bands and Orchestra performed at the Band and Orchestra Festival held at Novi High School. The 7th grade orchestra, 7th grade band, and 8th grade band received straight first division ratings. The 8th grade orchestra received second division ratings for their stage performance and a first division rating in sight reading. Congratulations to all band and orchestra students. In addition, on March 22nd, the 7th grade women's choir, 7th and 8th men's choir, and 8th grade women's choir performed at Michigan Schools Vocal Music Association District Choral Festival at Walled Lake Northern High School. Each choir sang 2 selections and were judged on 6 elements by 3 judges. They also had to show independent musicianship by sight reading for a judge. All groups qualified for states. The adjudicators commented on their maturity, musicianship, and overall performance on and off the stage. All the choir groups did a fantastic job. Detroit Science Fair results were outstanding this year. Sai Pranav Janyavula received the grand awards for physics. He will be invited to the award ceremony held at the Detroit Athletic Club on May 20th. The following students received first place in their category: Catherine Dong, Anjani Konaru, Adina Chu, Alexander Wan, and Christopher Chang. Second place winners include Ashwin Balaji, Prachi Fosdar, and Claire McCoppin. Third place winners were Krishanu Bose, Aditya Sriram, Meghana Lanka, and Lasya Koduri. In addition, we had 9 outstanding awards, 9 excellence awards, and 2 honorable mention awards. We have a very talented students, Vinay Mully, who won the middle school spelling bee and, more importantly, the Oakland County spelling bee. Vinay, who is an 8th grader, competed against 85 students to win the opportunity to represent Oakland County at the next round of competition held in May at Washington, D.C. Art competition qualifiers. 5 middle school students submitted artwork for Oakland County competition. Melissa Wang, Shruti Patel, and Paige Osterkamp were selected to go on to the state level competition held in Lansing in early March. After that level of judging, Paige's artwork also qualified for the middle school top 15 and will be displayed at the state show. March 31st was the NMS annual variety show. We had around 50 students perform with acts including singing, dancing, acting, playing instruments, and a Chinese yo-yo demonstration. The 8th grade math club team, Chris Zhang, Jacob Huang, Varun Mimigata, and Snehesh Das, competed at the state competition on March 11th. They took 3rd place overall for teams in the state final. Jacob Huang took 8th place for individuals. A few of the video broadcasting students entered the 49th Annual Michigan Student Film Festival and came back with outstanding results. The best of show entries will have their films shown at the DIA's Detroit Film Theater at the K-8 Awards on April 29th. Ritika Tiwari and Alice Connor made a Meet Mrs. Schnerstein film, and Emily McNichol and Loretta Shaw produced the Novi Middle School yearbook commercial. Both of these films won a Best of Award Show award. Parker Jones and David Will created the Novi Middle School Game Club commercial, which won an honor award.
Wow. Lots going on. Thank you for sharing. Any questions that we have for Evelyn this evening that she might be able to answer? It's a lot of information. The April 29th is down at the DIA. Is that what I heard?
Yes,
you
I
see?
believe so.
And it's open to the public, I would assume, so that might be a nice event if people are able to go down and see some of the films that won awards. That's great. Thank you for being here and for sharing it. The next item on our agenda is comments from the audience. These would be comments related to agenda items only. If we have anyone in the audience that would like to speak to our agenda items, please approach the podium, fill out a green card from the back of the room. You can either give it to Ms. Holly or leave it on the podium. We would ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the board at this point about agenda items? Seeing none, we will move on. We'll be moving past our NEF Teacher of the Year that is on the agenda because apparently, along with several other snafus of trying to get back into the swing of things, we have had another snafu. I see it's kind of Murphy's Law. There were several little glitches with today that have occurred. I'm not taking credit or blame for any, but that is the case in this situation. So we'll move on, and we are coming to our consent agenda items. Items included in the consent are those who have previously been considered by the board in committee or at a prior meeting and are of such routine nature that discussion is not required, but we can have discussion about it. You can request that any items be removed from consent agenda for further discussion, or if additional information is needed. So we have 3 items on our agenda this evening. We have approval of the minutes from March 16th, approval of our bills, and the approval of 2 field trips. Is there any of those that board members would like to single out or have removed from the consent agenda for any reason? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion. Thank you. Mr. Mena?
Yeah, motion to approve consent items A through C as presented.
Support.
And moved by Mr. Mena and supported by Mrs. Stevenson. Do we have any discussion on the consent agenda items? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Okay, next we have our action items for this evening. Our first action item is the personnel report. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. On the personnel report this evening, we have several retirements and resignations and also 2 leaves of absence. Barb Corwin, a teacher at Village Oaks, Don Crockett, a science teacher at the high school, Michelle Ferguson, a teacher at Parkview, Jennifer Harvey, an art teacher at the high school, and Kathy Ciarto, a Village Oaks teacher, all have turned in their letters of retirement. And then we have Dana Saltzman and Kevin Sutherland who have resigned from the district. In addition, we have Marianne Check, who is requesting a leave of absence for personal reasons. For the next school year, she is a teacher at Novi Woods. And Hannah Mertz, who is a Village Oaks teacher, is requesting, as per their contract, the second year leave of absence. In their contract, it says they can have 2 years of a leave of absence, and this would be her second year. And so we would recommend that the board approve these personnel recommendations.
Okay, can I have a motion?
I move that the Novi School District Board of Education adopts the personal report recommendations as presented.
It's been moved by Mrs. Stevenson and supported by Mrs. Hood. Is there any discussion on our personnel report this evening?
Well, just another one of my son's teachers is listed on here as retiring, and I don't know if it's a coincidence. You know, hopefully they've been out of their classroom for a couple of years. It wasn't them, but Michelle Ferguson is going to be greatly missed at Parkview, and it leaves another very big hole. Jennifer Mikos is going to have a very hard time filling up that building with teachers. You know, not with kids, but with teachers. So, I'm sorry to see her go.
I would like to note that our building principals and Ms. Diglio have been busy posting jobs, and so we have many of these jobs already posted, and so the goal is to bring to the board replacements for the teachers who are retiring or resigning before the end of the school year.
Great. And can I, Ms. Scaggle? Oh, Mrs. Stevenson, sorry.
It's okay. Is this our maximum now? Are we at our
We had
limit for our retirements based on when they're supposed to retire and
Yep,
everything?
the budget has called for 10, and we have met that cap, I believe, right?
This
Mr. Barr?
actually, for any teacher, just makes 9. We actually have 3 more that will be coming either to the next meeting or the meeting after that. So we expect we will be at 12. So we've actually revised my projections for next year to account for 12 retirements. You know, with, of course, there's always potential that you get a couple later on that just aren't sure yet. So 9 so far after this board was approved with potential, very strong potential for 3 more.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional discussion before I call the question? Okay, all those in favor of the personnel report as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Okay, our next item is our negotiating teams for the spring term of 2017. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. 3 of the 4 collective bargaining agreements, the Novi Education Association, or NEA, the Novi Educational Support Personnel Association, or NESPA, and the Novi Transportation Association, NTA, for the district expire on June 30th, 2017. The administrators' contracts represented by the Novi Association of School Administrators, or NASA, expire on June 30th, 2017. It is the board's desire to enter into negotiations soon so that mutually acceptable agreements can be reached prior to June 30th expiration date and the start of the 2017-18 school year. The following bargaining teams are recommended to bargain with the various employee groups on behalf of the district. For the Novi Education Association, the teachers group, Carol Diglio would be the chief spokesperson, Steve Barr, myself, and Dr. Weber would be the negotiating team. For the Novi Educational Support Personnel Association would be Ms. Diglio as the chief spokesperson and Mr. Barr on that team. For the Novi Transportation Association, it would be Ms. Diglio as the chief spokesperson, Steve Barr, and Cindy Valentine, who is our director of transportation. And for the Novi Association of School Administrators, it would be Ms. Diglio as the chief spokesperson, Mr. Barr, myself, and Dr. Weber. And we would ask the board to approve these so that we can enter into successful negotiations with these various groups.
Okay, I would entertain a motion. Mrs. Glebzinski.
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education authorize the above noted individuals to bargain contracts on behalf of the district.
Support.
It's been moved by Mrs. Glebzinski and supported by Mrs. Cadwell. Do we have any discussion on the item? Mrs. Glebzinski?
Right, as I was reviewing this and thinking about the responsibilities of the management negotiating team for the district, I spent a little time reviewing who is typically on a negotiating team on behalf of management. And I just wanted to share, on the employer side, the negotiating team typically consists of the human resources leader, the company owner, legal counsel, and often a compensation and benefits specialist whose job is to prepare labor costing scenarios. So based on that, our human resources leader is Ms. Diglio. Our company owner or leader is Dr. Matthews, and the person to prepare labor costing scenarios is Steve Barr. So it was logical from my point of view that those would be the individuals that would be part of the negotiating team. I also looked at what I would want in terms of the leadership in that, and I came up with 3 things. One is experience negotiating, and all of the individuals I mentioned have had experience in the previous at least 4 years with negotiations. Knowledge of the contract language. Over the last couple years, Ms. Diglio has spent an incredible amount of time on all of the contracts, going over all of the language and bringing those up to date. So she knows those intimately, and I think that's really important in terms of moving forward and any adjustments we make to the contract language. And then also professionalism on behalf of those individuals that represent the management team. And recently the board did receive a letter from one of our association presidents describing our human resources manager as open, collaborative, fair, consistent, and respectful. And those are all things that are really important to me and that I really value in terms of what our organization brings to the table to negotiate in good faith with our employee labor groups. So I'm proud to support the slate of individuals that have been put forth to do the negotiating.
Other discussion? Mr. Cook?
I agree that these have been consistent members across the last few years. The question I have neglected to ask, and I kind of would like to know, is have these people gone through any training for negotiations in particular contract negotiations? You don't have to answer now. You can get back to me later.
Okay.
The other comment I'd like to make is just because we have social media doesn't mean we have to use it. And there's been a comment made recently in social media that was kind of surprising. And when you have a fiduciary responsibility to the district, I didn't believe those comments were appropriate, and therefore I'm not going to support these teams right now.
Other discussion? Okay, well, without further discussion, I'll just say just briefly that I agree. We've had great success the last few. Given the circumstances, I should say, our success with the teams that we have has been good. Our track record, I think, has been good, and I think that it's been a difficult time in many districts to establish, a sense of fairness and morale, I think, among teachers, and I think that our current teams have done a pretty good job of, I don't want to say combating that, but making that less of a factor in our own negotiations, and clearly the 10% that we're committed to keeping on our that they have agreed with as well. So for all those reasons, and certainly for the reasons, I would echo Mrs. Klubzinski's comments that what we're looking for is experience and people that have had a good proven track record, and I think that we have, and I'm also glad to support this slate. So without further discussion, I will call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion carries 5-1. Mr. Cook dissenting. Next, we have our site improvements bid package number 2. Dr. Matthews, I turn to you.
And I will turn to Mr. Barr.
Thank you. Presented before you tonight is the second reading for the site improvements bid package number 2, which is primarily paving at the high school, the athletics lot, and also repaving the boulevard up to the SB towards Meadows 6 and Novi Woods. In addition, concrete replacement in terms of sidewalks that will be identified in the next few weeks. There's a placeholder for square footage and amount of money to deal with any kind of concrete issues that may have happened over the winter time. The bid tabulation is included, which you saw a couple weeks ago, and the recommendation is to award this to asphalt specialists in the amount of $615,280 to be funded from the Capital Projects Fund and the Sinking Fund. I mentioned the Sinking Fund occasionally because when you have repairs, you take those out of the Sinking Fund. When you're doing more long-term improvements, you take those out of the bond. Any questions?
Well, can I take a motion first, and then we'll have questions? Mr. Mena, Mr. Cook, one of you. Fight it out.
All right, I'll take this one then. So I'll move that the bid for the site improvements be awarded to Asphalt Specialist Inc. in the amount of $615,280. Contingent upon successful contract negotiations, further that the Assistant Superintendent of Business and Operations be authorized to expend the funds from the Capital Projects Funds and Sinking Funds.
Support.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Mena and supported by Mr. Cook. Do board members have additional questions for Mr. Barr? Or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Next, we have our next technology bid package number 15. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. And again, I will turn to Mr. Barr.
Technology bid package number 15 is for security system upgrades or security cameras. This was presented to you at the March 16th board meeting. We had a very good turnout with our bids, and the recommendation is to award the bid for security system upgrades to Suntel Services in the amount of $276,695.65.
All right, I would entertain a motion. Mr. Cook.
I move that in the best interest of Novi Community School District, bid for security system upgrades be awarded to Suntel Services in the amount of $200,076,695.65, contingent upon successful contract negotiations. Further, that the Assistant Superintendent of Business and Operations be authorized to expend the funds from the capital projects funds.
Is there support?
Support.
It's been moved by Mr. Cook and supported by Mrs. Klebzinski. Is there additional discussion on this item on the part of the board? No, we did have this at our last meeting, I know. All right, well, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Next, we have our file servers bid. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. And again, I turn to Mr. Barr.
In conjunction with the security system upgrades that you just approved, we need to purchase new file servers. Before you is the second reading for the purchase of file servers that's available under the REMC contract, which is a state cooperative bid. This was presented to you at the March 16th board meeting. The recommendation is to purchase the file servers from C-High Computer Products in the amount of $135,015 to be purchased from the capital projects funds. These servers do have, in the recommendation letter attached, do allow for growth in, it's amazing when you start seeing gigabytes, terabytes, megabytes, there's lots of bytes in here, but they allow for a significant amount of growth in the event that we need to add cameras over the years coming. So if any questions or after your motion, we have to address them.
Entertain a motion? Thank you, Mr. Cook.
Move that in the best interest of Novi Community School District, the purchase of file servers be awarded to C-High Computer Products in the amount of $135,015, contingent upon successful contract negotiations. Further, that the Assistant Superintendent of Business Operations be authorized to expend the funds from the capital project funds.
Support?
It's been moved by Mr. Cook and supported by Mr. Mena. Do we have additional questions or discussion on our file servers? I know we covered this pretty thoroughly last time, but has there been anything additional that has come up?
I was going to joke and ask if we were sure that 130 terabytes of space was going to be enough space, but
Yes.
I think back to okay. I mean, I just think back to my earlier days in IT when our IT manager walked in with a 9 gigabyte drive, and we just thought that was unbelievably big, and why we would waste the money on something like that. And I haven't done the math, but the amount of space that 130 by 30 terabytes compares to is exponentially greater. So now I know we use a lot of space here, but I would imagine that would last us a little bit of time anyway.
We keep 30 days of storage. We don't keep obviously indefinite storage. We keep about 30 days of storage. That was what we based the servers on.
Great.
So as Mr. Menace suggested, within 30 days we generate a lot of big
A lot, yes. I don't know how many zeros terabytes are. You might know, Mr. Mena, but there's a lot of zeros and terabytes.
Yeah.
Our middle school student may know how many zeros
Yes.
are.
Something like our national debt, probably somewhere like that.
Okay, we digress. Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries 6-0. Next, we have our policy updates and revisions. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. The Governance and Policy Committee has reviewed and approved the following practices that are due for revision and updating and brought them before the board for information and discussion at the March 16, 2017 board meeting. They are policy number 0100 with definitions, policy number 7540.01 on technology privacy, and policy number 7540.02 web content services and apps. These policies all are connected, and so we can address them one by one, or we can address them all together. It was rightly pointed out by Mr. Cook at our last meeting that our definition bylaw was lacking, and so we have updated the definitions page that should be duly noted. The technology privacy, you will see the changes that are made there are mainly wording, replacing a phrase computers, telephone systems, etc. with district technology resources as the definer for what we have in the district. And then our third policy takes some of those definitions and adds them to the policy on web content services and apps. So we would ask the board to adopt these policies as they have been presented and vetted through the Governance and Policy Committee.
This is information discussion on these.
No, these-
Oh, I
these-
apologize.
Yep.
Okay.
It's on the agenda.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm going to make a motion that
Thank
in
you.
the best interest of the school district, the Board of Education adopt the Neola policies as presented.
Moved by Mrs. Blazinski and supported by Mrs. Hood. Thank you for clarifying that. I apologize. I got thrown off by the technology. Is there discussion on these? Mr. Cook?
Yeah, reading through them, there's a number of typographical things and other things that I still think need to be clarified. In 100 on page 1, it calls for a definition. In the bottom paragraph, personal communication devices as defined in bylaw 0100 above. Personal communication devices are actually defined below.
Okay.
Okay. It also calls out information resources. Does that have to do with, also include like jump drives and thumb drives that students carry or people carry on their key rings?
That is a good question, and I'm not sure we talked about that in the policy.
It says include any data information in electronic, audiovisual, or physical form, so it seems to me it would include that.
Okay. Page 4, personal communication devices. Is that in reference to anything that's personally owned by a student or faculty or staff member, or is that including anything that is owned by the district?
It's just defining what personal communication devices are. And then in a policy where that's used, I believe it would identify.
It does not. It
Could you
just
tell
calls
me?
out personal communication. We'll get
Okay.
going down through this. Okay. Also in the definitions for a relative, it says it as defined in negotiated and collective bargaining agreements. In the policies that refer to any of that, it calls out as IRS defined. I do believe we should be consistent in that. Okay. On page 5, technology resources. We call it out technology resources in the definition bylaw, but everywhere in the other policies, it's called out district technology resources, and I assume by meaning district on there, it is district-owned resources.
Are you questioning the use of board versus district? Because we did call Neola and ask about that. I apologize. Say your question again.
The definition calls out technology resources.
Okay.
In the policies, it has been changed from board to district technology resources. Definition should be called out as district technology resources then.
So the title of
Yes.
that section, you would like to have it referred to as district technology.
Unless we are going to include all personal owned devices in that also. On 7540.01, here's where it's calling out district, but also in the second paragraph, it still calls out board computer systems, networks, and telephone systems. I do believe that should have been changed to district technology resources also, like everything else. In the third paragraph, it calls out that all passwords or security codes must be registered to the board or with the board. I'm wondering how that is being done, who's doing that?
We did talk about that. You want to address that? Passwords. Those are in security codes. Those are registered with the technology department. Correct.
Correct.
So those are
Okay.
that's a standard practice that's already being taken
Okay.
care of.
On page 3, first paragraph, extent necessary to determine if files, email, voicemails constitutes a public record or And by definition, in the definition policy, that is information resources.
I'm not following that comment. Can you say that again?
In the first paragraph,
Yeah.
it calls out the determined files, email, voicemail, constitutes an email, files, emails, and voicemail. That in definition is called out as information resources.
Okay.
And I'm looking for consistency.
Yeah.
If we're
And
gonna
we
do-
should be.
It should be consistent across it.
I certainly don't disagree. I guess I'm wondering if you'd like to pull this.
I've got comments on all three of them, so
I guess I'm a little, I know we had short notice this week, but this was on our thing from the last meeting. Were some of these already communicated to?
I don't believe so. I didn't get a chance to read through them until today. Extenuating circumstances, and which I'd rather not go into.
Oh, okay.
It may be appropriate that we delay approval of these policies until we have a chance to talk with Mr. Cook and review his comments, and we could bring them back to the board at the next meeting or a later date.
There's nothing timely in here, is that correct? So why don't, if you want to
Okay.
provide that information, and
Sure.
then we can go through it with a finer tooth comb and correct some of those. That seems like it would be a
That's fine.
better
Yeah, I'm
use.
fine with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
That makes sense.
All right.
So we will table those policy revisions that were up for action this evening.
Yeah, and they will come back to us then next week, hopefully, for action, provided we get the appropriate changes made. So, but we got a quick turnaround because we do have a meeting next.
Correct. So it may not, it may not
may
be.
be the meeting
It
after
may be
that.
the meeting after that.
Okay, as long as there's not a time factor, I think we're
Right,
good with that.
I think we are.
Okay. If we're okay to move on without a break, I know we've got someone waiting anxiously to discuss our middle school science text.
Eagerly, I think eagerly would be.
Eagerly. So our next is information and discussion. We have a middle school science textbooks and materials. Dr. Matthews.
I will turn to Dr. Weber to introduce this topic.
Second. At the February 16, 2017 board meeting, the science teacher leaders of the district, including Emily Plonsky, presented the new science standards in the state of Michigan, based on the next generation of science standards, or NGSS, that the state board adopted on November 10th, 2015. The science content area leaders, in collaboration with the Novi Middle School Science Department, have proposed a change to the middle school science curriculum for the science education in the program that would be called CPUP, which is Science Education for Public Understanding Program. This curriculum was proposed to start this fall at Novi Middle School. This innovative curriculum aligns to the new Michigan Science Standard. Each unit consists of a series of scientific investigations that allow students to learn the crucial science content necessary. The textbooks have been available for review the past few weeks up at the board office. After the curriculum was selected, it is my job in the business office to send out competitive bids. Now, when you have a curriculum slot, whether it's a social studies textbook, a science textbook, a math textbook, it's typically only get one bid. It's just how it is. You have one person that's going to provide that, but still by law, we're required to send a bid out. So we sent bids out. I gave them 3 weeks. We received one bid from the company LabAids. That bid that was received is recommended for award in the amount of $132,430.40. This purchase would be funded from the general fund primarily, and the things in the bid, specifically carts, we would take out of the capital projects fund. Including your packet is, a summary of the different items that are in the textbooks and materials bid. This is considered we've talked in the past about program enhancements. This is intentional expansion or change in our science curriculum. As you know, this current year we committed a considerable amount of money to the science kits in 5th and 6th grade. This will continue over the next 2 years. This is really now dealing with 7th, 8th grade curriculum for the science program. So we've talked before on some budget items about program enhancements. This is one of the most significant ones that we're doing this year and next year, when we continue into the following year. that is really just the high level of the program. And we'll, if Ms. Polanski has anything to talk about with the program, or if you have questions, or if Dr. Weber would say anything about it.
Yep, certainly. We had a thorough discussion of our approach to science programming a number of board meetings ago. And we just brought Emily here if there are any questions from the board that would need to be addressed. Thank you.
All right. Do we have questions or discussion? Mrs. Klubzinski?
I don't have questions. You don't need to panic.
I'm not panicking.
I
Don't
have
worry.
comments. I was at the board office this afternoon and looked through the curriculum. And it has been quite a while since I've looked at a science textbook, but I was seriously impressed with the style of writing that's used in the textbook. Each section starts out with a little vignette about, a couple, I'll say middle school kids because that's who it's geared towards, kind of setting the scene in a scenario that the kids could relate to. And then the presentation itself has nice photographs, but it also has illustrations, and it really would result in kids wanting to investigate. They start out identifying procedures, then they do observations, then they learn how to chart, and then they learn how to evaluate the chart, and then they do analysis, and then their extension of activities. And honestly, I sat there going, I probably would have really liked science and stuck with it longer if it was presenting. Some of the topics were things like weather and earth plates and just stuff that I probably never read earth science is probably what this boils down to. But I am really excited. The other thing is each topic seemed to be its own book, which means you move those between classes. One class can be studying. Am I right?
Actually, no. That's
Well, forget that part.
I think that might be interesting. Right now, each unit is a book, and there will be 35 books of each unit in each classroom.
Okay.
So
No, but I meant they'd all do the same topic, but another class would be doing, no?
we're going to have
We're
all look at
doing
the same pace.
thing.
But since one of the great things we did to reduce costs was that these texts are now all online. So each teacher will have one class set, a little bit more. So if you have a child who says, you know what, I am not going to be able to access this at home, they will be able to check a book out from the teacher. But for the most part, they will have access to the online book. And then they will have classroom textbooks. And as you mentioned, these books look very different. They also read like tasks and explorations. But what we've done is instead of spending all the money on textbooks, using that same pot of money, we are now getting textbooks and carts filled with materials.
Right.
Because our kids are going to spend a lot more time exploring and figuring out than defining terms.
Yep. Great. Yep, it was wonderful.
Mrs. Cadillac.
I have a couple of questions.
Stevenson.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. I have a couple of questions. One for Steve Barr, but maybe you can answer it. So since they're online, do we have to pay a license fee for each online book, or is there?
We have a 7-year subscription, and you'll see that's built in on your budget.
Okay. And my next question, regarding the earth science piece, I know earth science is sometimes an elective for high school students for their science elective. Would that be a part of that, or no, that will not be because?
I'm so glad you brought this up. This is another one of our significant changes, and I think we kind of touched on this a little bit last time, but we gave you guys a lot of information. So one of the things that in the past at the high school, we required every student take biology, and then they had to pick 2 out of the 3 between earth science, physics, and chemistry, which meant not all of our kids were getting the same thing. But we were trying to deal with this challenge that there are 4 subjects to be covered: biology, chemistry, physics, and earth science, but only 3 years to get them done before that test at the end of their junior year. So the new solution, and it was one of the options provided for us in the NGSS appendices, was to take those 4 classes and call them biology, chemistry, physics, but integrate the high school earth science standards throughout. But that handles the high school earth science standards. There are additional middle school earth science standards that are part of the learning progression. We were very intentional at placing earth science in the 8th grade because we thought they will finish 8th grade, they will have their earth science, and now that will be the theme that weaves through all 3 of their high school science courses.
Okay. I couldn't remember. Thank you.
questions?
I have a comment.
Okay.
First off, Ms. Klubzinski, for my 7 years here, I can always count on seeing you looking at the textbooks across the hall.
Does that mean I'm a nerd?
Not at all. It means that you and several other board members take your job seriously, and I really appreciate that. And Emily at the podium, as you can see, and I don't think you can thank people enough, is really a treasure for our district in so many ways. But one thing that she wouldn't tell you is that she's helping with the governor and the governor's people to make sure Novi is very well represented at the governor's Education and Talent Summit, and has a couple presentations from Novi folks there. And another reason that this district is what it is because we have teachers like Emily, and you can't see him, but her husband, Brent, back there as well, in the district, who are deeply committed to our kids. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here on your date night to fill us in on this. We do appreciate that. And the science book will continue to be up here for board members if they want to look at it before our next meeting, which is next week on the 20th. So if you do have questions, Ms. Plonsky, I'm sure would be happy to answer them. We could send them her way or send them through RJ's office if you can answer them for us.
And you'll see a cart, it's empty, but just picture inside that cart will be trays of supplies, like lift chemicals and like rock slide trays and everything that would go along to support that book. So when you see these investigations that are described in the book, the supplies are right with it.
Are those something that need replenished then?
Actually, yes, but the great thing about CPUP is we replenish science supplies every year. And so we have a middle school and a high school science budget that does that. But CPUP does these micro things. So if you'll notice, a lot of their activities have these tiny trays. So you're using less chemicals. And I met with teachers in their first year and second year of rollout of CPUP in Colorado last summer. And that was one of the first things I asked them. Like, how would you compare your purchase of supplies in this new program to how you used to do science? And they said they're actually spending less money on refilling these kids. We are not going to have an automated refill plan like we do for K-6, because at the 7th and 8th grade level we have dedicated science teachers that's their full-time task, and they feel very confident that they will be able to, at the end of the year, assess, I need more hydrogen peroxide, and put that order in and submit it the way we have always done for middle school science supplies.
And then just one other quick question. You said we only got one bid, and I know in a lot of the other things that we do, we kind of look at that, how many people bid on it, and is that a normal thing with textbooks?
So for all textbooks, you will always just get one bid, because you've just got, you pick out the curriculum that you want, and you only got one publisher that would actually provide that textbook.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. Did you have something else, Mrs. Stevenson?
I do have a question I know you mentioned that if students didn't have access to the internet, I don't know if maybe there should be some kind of survey to go out to find out if parents or families have those access, because if not, then would our district be willing to provide them internet services so they can have those access to those online textbooks at home?
I can address that. We are going to start a parent survey next week, and part of the parent survey asked that question, if they have internet access. And then we also had the new Bright House company, Spectrum, come to Novi, and they did a presentation which we had Alice Smith, who's our title coordinator, attend, and they talked about service for families who can't afford the internet, and so we would try to work with Spectrum and hook them up so that they potentially would have free service at their home through Spectrum.
Great. And also, I know, just being a counselor, sometimes our students, they can't look at the computer for that long, so like they need it larger and printed, so I'm hoping 35 would be enough for them to go around.
We think so. Also, one of the things that we might have mentioned the last time is what the students will be doing with their textbook in their classroom is they'll be building their science notebook. And so that is part of how this makes science, how science will be done differently. So it's not just about reading other people's ideas, but they will be building their own personalized textbook to take home with them every day in that science notebook. So that's also available. And I think as a learner myself, that's what I would be using. And we also, it comes with these, they're called like Blue-ins. So a teacher copies out and has every kid as they walk in pick like a half sheet page and they glue it in. And it might be a blank data table, or it might be some prompts, or it might be a few keywords. But even part of the process at the end back there, look, the kids are building their own glossary, because instead of providing these vocabulary terms, for example, that might be traditionally textbook up front, the idea that's really emphasized in the next generation of science standards, which we have adopted as the new Michigan science standards, is activity before concept and concept before vocabulary. So we actually don't want them to have these defined terms just yet. We want them to have an experience, do an experiment, get an idea of what we're talking about. Then, oh, we have a label for this. Now I'll give you that word. Instead of maybe what we used to do, which was, all right, here are the words we're going to use in this unit. Let's quick define them. Kids will go through their book, define them, maybe kind of not think about them again. And now let's figure out what those words mean. So that's also part of the flipping philosophy.
When you're doing the flipping philosophy, are you going to also record them? Because sometimes, what if the student's not there to...
Oh my gosh, that's one of the best things about CPUP. They have something called, it's called Labsent. And so even, because it's so lab focused, the first round, the first group of people who did CPUP said, this is a problem when a kid's gone. So they actually had a science teacher film pieces of these experiments or these experiences, but not give out all the answers. So it's not like a kid can just watch this video and get all the answers. They will still have to engage in the figuring and solving, but they have a video of exactly what would have happened in class that they would have had to figure out to then do at home.
Great, thank you.
That's kind of a good setup. I'm not sure if you guys talked ahead of time. Labs. All right, well, thank you for being here, and certainly if board members have questions or want to take a look at that, I would encourage you to come in. Oh, sorry.
I do, and I apologize. I mean, it was great, but I don't have a question for you right now. So you had talked about, and please indulge me for a second, because I think it might be a little bit off topic, but you did talk about this survey with regard to the concern that Ms. Stevenson had. I was just curious how that particular survey is going to be delivered, because if it's going to be electronically, then those folks who don't have internet access probably won't be able to respond to it. So
it can be sent to phones as well, and if we still have concerns, we will create paper copies for parents to have as well.
So I'm assuming that though most of our counselors are pretty in tune to those needs anyway.
And principals. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, terrific. Well, thank you again for being here. And next on our agenda, you can enjoy the rest of your evening now. Next on our agenda is our policy updates and revisions. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. The Governance and Policy Committee has reviewed and approved the following policies that are due for revision and updating, and is bringing them before the Board of Education for information and discussion. So there are 3 policies this evening. Policy number 3120, employment of professional staff. Policy 7540, new technology. Policy 7540.04, staff technology, acceptable use and safety. And so we would present these this evening, and I would have Ms. Glomzinski, if she wanted to review the changes.
I think it's, let's start with 3120, and I want to preface this with, there had been a number of questions about the employment process and vetting and involvement in recommending people to be interviewed, and also some questions about a section on page 2 with employment of members of immediate family. And we found the section that you're going to find in red was something that was created sometime in the past in our district. We're not quite sure what the circumstances were or whatever, but found it to be needing to be cleaned up and maybe clarified. So the result is the committee didn't approve anything. The committee merely recommends, because we're a group of 3. You'll see 3 paragraphs after that block in red that basically clarifies who can be employed by the board and The importance of disclosing publicly if you have a familial relationship with a candidate or an employee, and we make sure that they don't unduly influence the employment, and they're also not in a situation to evaluate a family member. So I haven't received questions so far, or the committee hasn't, about the revisions we made to 3120, but I wanted to share with you that was kind of the logic behind it. And if you have specific questions about the wording, if you can send those to us, I think it might be easier to respond to everybody on the board. But that's what 3120 is about, basically, and the changes that we made and why we are recommending those. Yep.
Are you going to go, did you want to take questions in between or just at the end after you?
Do you have a specific question on 3120?
Yeah, just a quick one. I noticed.
Committee, Willie.
Well, correct, but I noticed that on page 3 of this one, there's sort of an unanswered question. So we're not really looking at a recommended policy, but sort of a work in progress. So my assumption is that we're still in the process of getting that information and updating it. So
We received that today, and so we will share that with the board in an email so that the board has that clarification.
Thank you.
And again, that related to in a situation where there's a need in a high, what do you call it? High demand area. That is there an opportunity for us to look at somebody that's not certified, and what would be the parameters, right? So that's what you're asking about, and you're talking about
the career technical education.
people.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
Thank you.
So,
And we have that clarification, so we will share it with the board.
Okay.
That was one of my questions. I have another question. We have an option on page 1 that's checked. It says such approval shall be given only to those candidates' employment. Approval for what? Because the sentence before that is in regard to a criminal background check. So if this is our approval for employment, I do believe it should say that. And according to our definitions, shall means we have to approve it. I do believe that should be may. Because if it says shall, it means the board has to approve the recommendation, and that's not always the case. Okay.
All right. So what you're basically what our practice is that the personnel recommendations come to the board for approval.
Yes.
But that's not what you think that communicates.
That does not
This
communicate that. This just says such approval shall be given, and in our definitions, shall means must. Okay, and it says that right in our definitions in policy 100.
Okay.
Well, that sentence also, it ends with only to those candidates for employment recommended by the superintendent. So does that mean that it means that we, the board, can only approve hiring someone who has been recommended by the superintendent? Is that what it means?
If you look at the second option would mean that the board selects the candidate, and that's not our practice.
Right.
So
Right. Okay.
that's why we checked the box that we did.
And that makes sense. Okay.
But I do believe this also should say that it's the approval for employment.
Yeah, it says that in the second paragraph above. I can see where you feel like it's disjointed because it is fairly separated from that, but it's the way Neola wrote it.
Yeah, it is. Like you say, it is disjointed.
So
that's why we bring it to the board for discussion.
Yep.
And my only other question on this is, and it probably has to do with the state law. It's on page 4. It says pursuant to state law. Highly qualified means, and it lists a number of qualifications here as a minimum, as at least, or meets, or it seems to be that is minimum qualifications, and not highly qualified. So it just kind of was confusing to me, but if that's what the state law defines it as, then that's what
That
it
is
shall
how
be.
the state law defines.
Okay.
Any other discussion or questions? Obviously, this will come back to us again next
Right.
week, so if something comes up in the meantime or you notice a different issue that needs addressed, and we'll get the revisions out.
Yep.
Yeah, as soon, probably Monday, the district is closed.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So the next policy is 7540. And
This is a new policy, so as such, it will have to come before us for 2 readings before it's
So
adopted.
tonight, plus one more reading before it can be approved.
Exactly.
I think this is the second. I think it was on last information discussion.
Oh, well, we'll clarify that and make sure before we put that on. That's a new thing to us, so I just want to make sure that we're paying attention to that. Thank you, Mrs. Holly.
7540.01 and .02 were brought to us last time, not 7540.
Okay?
7540.
So this will come tonight and next week for information and discussion.
Are there questions about that particular policy, or Mrs. Bludzinski, would you like to address?
no, because it's all new. We just made a couple selections based on what we thought was our practice. So if you have comments or questions, you can send those through to Dr. Matthews or
Yep.
Sheila, and we'll address them.
Because we'll have next week to discuss this as well.
All right.
And then the last one, probably the one that people are most interested in, staff technology, internet acceptable use and safety. We, on page 6, we edited, staff members shall not access social media for personal use on the district's network. We've clarified before what the use of our district technology is for. And then under the social media use, this has been something that seems to be of concern. You can see the red paragraph that staff members shouldn't be creating or inferencing, posting that they speak on behalf of the district. That's separate. So we have been talking about when social media gets used. So we thought that clarified that. So again, I know that's a lot to read, and it just came out a couple of days ago. If you have other questions, please send them.
And because this is property, this does apply to every person in the district.
Not just staff.
Right.
So instead of saying staff in here, we should say staff and students.
Oh, the title of it? I thought the students had.
Well, there's
Yeah,
also a
there's
number
a
of places in the policy where it
Looks
says
to
staff
student.
only. It only says staff. So if it applies to students also, those are issues also.
There is a
closed.
student technology
Yeah,
internet
in a
accessible.
different, in a different
But
section.
because it's property, it has to do with, mostly with ours. So if there are places that it says students in here, we would need to take that out, I would assume.
All right, so.
Employees, staff members. So, well, it looks like here again, maybe we need to look at the consistency, because at some point it says an employee's personal use, and it says and then staff member, so maybe it needs to say
And there are a
employees
number of
consistent.
places where it says board resources,
So why don't
instructional materials, which
Ms.
is
Holly and I will
policy.
go through that and make some connections. Again, this is not time sensitive necessarily, so we would not have to approve it next week. We could bring those changes back and have the board review them again next week, and then not vote on this until May 4th.
Okay. But I would encourage any board members that notice things.
Inconsistencies to let us know.
Right.
Yeah, to send those in to Mrs. Holly and and Dr. Matthews. All right, are there any other things along those lines with our policies that we just went over? All right. Well, next we have our next opportunity for comments from the audience. If I do not see anyone that would like to make comments from the audience right now, if we could move on. Our next item on our agenda is our superintendent's report. Dr. Matthews.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Our Novi High School Frog Force 503 team is competing in the state championships this weekend. There are 451 robotics teams in the state of Michigan, and Frog Force is ranked 14th in the state. Our Novi High School students had state testing this week. State testing for elementary and middle schools will begin in the next few weeks as well. Next week, we will have our winter sports athletic recognition at the beginning of the board meeting. As you know, the KLAA conference will have a new member for the 2018-19 school year. Belleville will replace Grand Blanc in the KLAA for the 2018-19 school year. For 2017-18, Grand Blanc will still be a full member of the KLAA. And that is my superintendent's report.
The next item on our agenda is a new item. It's administrative reports. I thought this would be a good opportunity for if we have things that are going on that are of interest to the board in your offices that may be coming at us down the road. It would be an opportunity to take a moment just to share that with us at this point so we have an idea of what's going on in your offices if there's anything, and if there's not, that's fine. So Dr. Matthews, I turn to you.
I will defer to my esteemed cabinet.
I will just offer that I will email you tomorrow a summary of the 3 proposals that the state has put forward on the state budget for school aid. The governor came out first, and then subsequently the House came out and the Senate came out. In terms of the impact on schools, for Novi schools, the House budget is the most generous to Novi. The governor's budget is the second most, and the Senate budget is virtually no money at all for Novi. And actually, for some districts, the Senate budget is a cut. So, it'll still be a good almost 2 months that's completed, but I put together a little tabulation of about 6 key categories to show kind of a summary side by side. And at some point, we may have to have board members and superintendent reach out to legislators in Lansing to share some opinions. Otherwise, construction continues, and if you drive by Village Oaks, you will see classrooms going up very quickly these days with the walls going up.
Great. Thank you. We'll look forward to that tomorrow.
If you had high school students, you recognize that some of them were home a little bit more this week because we had our MME testing this week at the high school. I'd like to thank our staff at the high school, teachers and administrators, for really providing an outstanding environment. I know Ms. Stevenson knows how serious the state takes that stuff. And when you have a small city like a Novi High School of over 2,000 kids, pulling that off is really something else. And our staff did a phenomenal job of that, and our kids were locked in and ready to go. We stopped over there to see them.
Not physically locked in.
No, just mentally.
Focused.
And so that was great. And then tonight, again, I can't say it enough, but last night I was also contacted by another school district on what we're doing on our science programming. People are very, very interested in that, and it's all because of people like Emily and teachers that we have. So again, thank you to them.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Cook?
I have a question for Dr. Weber. With the standardized testing that's in season now, like our orange barrels out on the roads, a lot of this is computerized. Are we trying to help our kids in the lower grades learn typing and stuff a little bit more in the curriculum so that they can, don't have to worry about searching back and finding the right keys and how to operate a mouse during their testing?
One of the most practical things that we've instituted as a district, and it's not because of standardized testing, but one of the things that we do really think gives our kids an advantage is the NWEA testing that they do twice a year. That is a computer interface. So when they do come up to these more high stakes tests, you could say, not only have they seen the format, but they've interacted with the hardware and that physical interface. So that's one thing that we're doing that we've done K through 10, so that should be helpful. And then providing opportunities with what the board has approved regarding our Chromebook carts that we have in our buildings, where walking around the district, you'll see kids engaging in a very natural way. Whereas when we came up from school, you would have a typing class or a keyboarding class. Instead, we believe the best way for kids to learn that is just to simply interact with that technology on a regular basis.
Any questions? All right, next we have our committee reports. I'm not sure if anybody has met. Mrs. Gludzinski.
We have not met. We last met March 14th, the Governance and Policy Committee, and we were scheduled to have a meeting today and next week to talk about legal counsel for the board, and based on some feedback, we are going to talk about that all as a board potentially at our April 29th meeting. And then also, we've been moving ahead with board operating procedures, and we want to spend some time also on the 29th talking at the entire board about operating procedures. And then there's been a question about broadcasting of board meetings, and a policy for that, and my notes from the last committee meeting indicate that we're going to base that off of Troy's policy 7000.06, and then that Ms. Holly will be providing that in an upcoming board meeting agenda for us to take a look at that, and it's new, so we'll see it twice before we review it. And we'll meet next on May 11th as a committee.
All right, thank you for that. We have no further things. Now is our opportunity for board communication. Things that board members have been involved in. I know it's maybe been a little quiet because we've had break, but are there things that have gone on in the district that you've been a part of, or professional development? What anybody else?
I have a question.
Okay.
The working session that is scheduled for the 29th.
Yes.
Have we set the hours for that yet, or is it still?
It's still at 3 o'clock, 8 to 3, I believe.
Because I cannot make it all day long. There's, the initial intent of the working sessions was for morning only, and my Saturdays get booked up, and so I cannot be here all day.
I had sent the thing out. I hadn't heard back from.
Yes, I responded to you that I could not make the full day.
Okay.
We will be going over we'll have the budget work session in the morning.
Okay.
And then in the afternoon, we're still having some discussions about the best use of that time, quite honestly. We think it'll probably be better used for policies and procedures after some feedback from the board governance committee, so that's what we'll be working on that
Okay.
afternoon. So at this point, that's the tentative plan, but we will be using that time to do the work of the board, obviously. I did attend today, kind of at last minute. We got information from Troon, and so I attended this wonderful school law workshop where they basically did a speed round on a lot of very student discipline, sinking fund update, labor and employee update, school finance and elections, special education, student issues, and legislative stuff. And they did that all between the hours of 9:30 and noon. So it was basically being fed with the fire hose, but there's a lot of great information in here, and some of it is very pertinent to what's going on in our district right now. I made a lot of notes, and I will provide this to Sheila to put in our book, and I'm going to go over some of the information with, I'd love to sit down with Carol for a little bit about some of the things that came up, just to kind of make sure that that those are things that she's also been apprised of. But certainly feel free to ask me anything. I don't know if I'll be able to answer it, but at this point, but it's a lot of great information, and at some point, I won't say immediately it'll be in board books, but it will be in there for board members that want to take a look. There's been a lot of changes in recent laws, and there have also been court cases in this past year that have really influenced how we do certain things, and some of that is included in there. Some of it's special ed related in terms of seclusion and restraint, which we've gone over, and I know we've attended some workshops on that, but there was a lot of additional information at this meeting that I thought was very helpful. So that was today, and then I also wanted to ask if any board member might be available or wanting to attend the May 2nd legislative. It's through the Michigan Association of School Boards, and it's an opportunity to meet with your legislators. They put on quite a day. Usually I am able to go. That's a date that I'm going to have trouble going, so if anybody is free on the 2nd, it is during the day. So if you want to check your calendars and see if that might be something that a board member is interested in. It's usually a pretty good event where they have a lot of legislators that come and do spend some time with school districts talking about the issues that are before them and how it impacts districts.
What time is that? Do you know?
I believe it's 9 to 2 on the 2nd, which is a Tuesday. All right. Without anything else to say, I will just address an issue that had come before the board. The district did receive a complaint alleging that Dr. Matthews violated board policy number 3120 concerning the employment of professional staff by recommending an individual for hire who was subsequently, after employment, he became an immediate member of his family as defined by that policy. As the board was not in itself in an appropriate position to investigate the allegations, it retained the Troon Law Firm to conduct an independent investigation into the allegations. An attorney with Troon, who is unfamiliar with the district, to assure objectivity, investigated the allegations, including giving Dr. Matthews a full opportunity to respond to them. The investigation concluded that Dr. Matthews did not violate Board Policy 3120 or any other policies in his recommendation of a certain individual to the district for hire, and that his recommendation did not improperly influence the district's decision to hire that individual. Additionally, the investigation concluded that Dr. Matthews did not communicate material facts about the allegations to the board in a prompt and forthright manner. While he was honest in his communications, he should have provided the board with more information sooner. To Dr. Matthews' credit, he admitted that he placed the board in a difficult position and accepted responsibility for exposing the board to inaccurate public perceptions about its hiring practices. Pursuant to policy number 1130, the maintenance of unusually high standards of honesty, integrity, impartiality, and professional conduct of school district's board members, employees, officers, and agents is essential to ensure the proper performance of school business, as well as to earn and keep public confidence in the school district. The board met with Dr. Matthews on December 22nd of 2016 and warned him that he's to be prompt and forthright with all material facts important to district issues or hiring practices in the future. He's also not to recommend immediate family members or individuals based purely on a personal relationship in the future without receiving the board's permission first. His failure to abide by these directives could result in discipline. That is the end of board communication. Do we have any additional things tonight before a motion to adjourn? Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? Mr. Mena.
Move to adjourn.
Support. It's been moved by Mr. Mena and supported by Mrs. Lubzinski. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion to adjourn carries 6-0. Thank you for being here with us this evening the entire time.